Where's the button?
Individual.
Where's the button to make it?
That's
big?
where it
Where's
comes
the-
up on that.
Behind the
All the
set of
guests.
professional audio.
Like, to make it full screen.
Yeah, no worries, it's right here.
It's coming.
Let's just wait a second.
Right?
Let's go back and just see it.
Where is it? No.
It's not one of those.
Ah, it's that.
That one.
See, right here.
Oh, it's up.
You want slideshows, which one?
Yeah, we are looking for it, but I don't see
It's
it.
usually here.
Yeah.
Where you trying
Oh,
to
hold
do?
on. Did you like? There we go.
Oh,
I see what we did there. It's okay.
thank God for Lisa. Seriously. Oh my God.
I'm gonna share sound just in case there's a video, which I have a feeling there is. Knowing you. Such a
Woo! Yeah.
beautiful. Let me just get rid of this and then we'll be okay. Okay, hi Stephanie. Thanks for being here. Okay. I'm gonna make them small so that we can all read what's happening here. And if you want to see them, let me know. I'll pull them back. They're there, I promise.
Okay, so this is our last session. Not forever, just for this piece. And first of all, after this session, I'm gonna send you a little email with a form that I will really be grateful if you can fill out so I can learn. What did you like, what was missing, what you would like to do next. Because we're gonna announce by the end of this month what is the next course that we're gonna be offering. So I wanna know what you would like to learn more about. But today, we're gonna do 3 things. Maybe nice if it will move. Oh, okay. We're briefly gonna talk about the last 20 years because we kind of jumped through it towards the end of last time. Then we will do a little summary of what each of the narratives is actually saying, because we kind of went from one to another. So just to get us to a point that we are leaving here tonight, and it's clear to us more or less, in a way that each of you will be able, hopefully, to say, to explain, to know, to articulate what each side is saying about the last 150 years, or how each of the sides is viewing this conflict. Then I'll talk about some of the solutions that were suggested over the years to solve the conflict. And then we'll just open up for questions and thoughts, and hopefully we'll end with a positive note towards the end. Okay, so first, the last 20 years. The summer of 2000 was a very crucial summer. I didn't put it here, but just to remind us kind of to be on the same page. First thing that happened in the summer of 2000 is that the Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Ehud Barak, decided to take our troops from Lebanon after being inside Lebanon for 18 years. And that was a very big ordeal. We can talk hours only about that. And there are books and movies that were done about it. Israel is pulling out of Lebanon after 18 years. Later on the same summer, the summit of King David, which is happening in this country, is the last year of President Clinton's administration. Ehud Barak is the Israeli Prime Minister, Yasser Arafat representing the Palestinian Authority, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization. If you remember, we were talking about the differences, but it really is the same thing. So if you know it as the PA, stands for Palestinian Authority, or PLO, which stands for Palestinian Liberation Organization, same thing exactly. They meet for 2 weeks in Camp David. After 2 weeks, it's the final dinner. Everything was very close. There was almost an agreement that was supposed to be signed. The plan was on the table. The general idea was land for peace. Most of the issues were discussed, such as Jerusalem, the Palestinian refugees around the world and their right to return, land, of course, swapping of land. Most of the issues were already discussed, so we're this close to sign an agreement. On the last dinner, Ehud Barak, in front of all the dignitaries, is telling Yasser Arafat, I am ready, you are ready, our people are ready, this is the time, this is the hour. Just promise me that after this, you're not gonna come with more requests. Because I'm willing to give you today 95% of your initial request lists. And if I'll give it all to you today and you're gonna come again tomorrow, I'm not gonna have anything else to give. So we need to make sure that signing this agreement, which will lead to an establishment of a Palestinian state, will be the end of this conflict. Yasser Arafat leaves the room for several hours. And later on that evening, President Clinton found him in his cabin and he's asking him, what's up? You can be the man of the hour. This is your time to create history. Say yes to what he answered. I'm not the representative of the entire Muslim world. I can only speak for my own people. Nobody understood what he meant by that. Everything collapsed. Everybody went home. Yasser Arafat went to Ramallah. Ehud Barak went back to Jerusalem. And immediately after, in September of 2000, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Ariel Sharon, who was the Minister of Defense, went up on the Temple Mount, which, truth to be told, was a regular thing to do for Jewish or Israeli officials on several occasions during the year, specifically between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the Palestinians really saw that as propaganda, as an act of doing spite. And of course, everything was already boiling since the collapse of King David. And that was literally the match that sort of set everything on fire. And that brings us to the Second Intifada. Very, very, very troublesome and I would say bloody time in the history of this conflict. From about 2000 till 2003, some will say 4, the entire land is burning. We're talking about buses that are exploding. We're talking about cafes and restaurants and marketplaces and shopping malls and dance clubs and hotels that are being exploded by terrorists that are coming from anywhere, because at that time, still all the borders were open. So Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza could freely come in and out anywhere they wanted in Israel without any issues. And of course, there's a lot of army operations as a response to that, both in Gaza and the West Bank. There are over 1,000 people that are being killed on each side. Many, 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 many thousands of injuries. Of course, many Palestinians being arrested and put in Israeli prisons. Some of them are there until this very day. And a lot of things are really boiling up. And towards the end of it, 2003, beginning of 2004, 3 things are happening. But before we go to those 3 things, I wanted to introduce a book to you that I don't know if you've seen, we're opening up a book club about Israel. So I hope to see you there. The first group is going to be more kind of history. So it's literally called The Concise History of the Land of Israel by Rabbi Daniel Gordis. It's an excellent book. He wrote it only in English. It's not even translated to Hebrew. You're laughing, why, Nina?
No, I interpreted for Dan Gordon, so I know him. He's amazing.
When is it gonna start?
So the meeting is going to be on January 17th. So you should go ahead on Amazon and order the book. Or I'm sure you can find it also in the library. Or maybe a friend have it. You can have it on Kindle, any way you want. It's in the newsletter, and there's the picture of the book is there, so it's easy to identify. I'll be honest with you, it's the first time that I'm going to lead a book club, so I'm not quite sure how it works that you read a book and then you only talk about it one time and then you move on. But apparently that's how it's done. So we're going to try it out. So you have all the way between now and January 17th to read the book. It's about 500 pages, but it's an easy read. It's really interesting, and we'll talk about the person, the author, of course, also. There are all kinds of things that we can say about him, but it's definitely one of the, I think, most important scholars of our time, contemporary. He resides in Jerusalem. I think he's actually from Los Angeles, right? So that's going to be the first book, and actually we will read this book, maybe number 3 or 4. But it's connected, so I just want to introduce it to you already. It's called The Son of Hamas, and maybe you heard about the writer. His name is Musab Hossein Youssef. His father was one of the 7 founders of the Hamas movement. And believe it or not, it was not founded in Gaza, it was actually founded in the West Bank. And Musab Hassan Yusuf grew up in the house of his parents. His father is a very, very famous, renowned, respected sheikh, Muslim sheikh, who is one of the founders of the Hamas. He was one of the kids that in 1987, 7, 8, 9, during the first Intifada was throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers. He was arrested, he was put in prison. After that, he came out of prison. He had a very interesting life story. I'm not going to tell you all of it, but eventually he becomes a spy for Israel. And during the second Intifada, he is one of the most important human resources that the Israeli government and army had inside the West Bank. Towards the end of the Intifada in 2002, again, many different things have happened to him. You will read it in the book. But eventually, he leaves the Palestinian territory and is actually coming to this country, and he requests asylum. And America doesn't quite know exactly what to do with him, granted the history. And eventually, the Israeli officer of the Shin Bet, who was his recruiter, is coming to testify in court in America and vouch for him. And eventually, he receives asylum. And the reason that maybe some of you heard of him, although I don't see the facial expressions that show that, but maybe in home somebody did, is that now he's speaking on every single news channel.
Right.
Not only now. This book came out about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
There was then a documentary done about him. It's called The Green Prince, which was his name or his sort of nickname or his operational name when he was serving as an agent, as a spy. And then he just started talking after he received asylum. And thanks to, I never remember her name, a nice lady journalist that basically helped him to write his book, the autobiography, that came out in English and then also in Hebrew. He started talking in the Congress at APEC conferences, like in big settings. And he's been very, very vocal for all the time. Of course, now with everything that's going on with this war, he is literally on the news every single day, and he's being interviewed for many different news channels. And it's just an unbelievable story, and it's firsthand. So it's, I think, an eye-opener on so many different levels.
Was that the end of the relationship between him and his father then?
There is no relationship between him and his father. His family disowned him. And when he came here, and the family, of course, did not know that he has been cooperating with the Israeli government and army. And when they found out, he called them from when he was already in America. He picked up the phone and he called them and he told them everything. And then his father said, "You are no longer part of our family, and if we will ever see you, then that will be the last day of your life." So he'll never going to be able to go back. I'm not sure if he's already a citizen here or something. But anyway, just if you're watching American television and American news, I'm sure you will see this name. He's really
He's
very
an excellent speaker.
vocal, yes.
You've probably all heard
very
of him.
coherent, very put together, very honest. And it's just an eye opener because it's somebody who's coming from inside. And anyway, just connected to the second Intifada, Hassan Musab Yusuf. The book is called Son of Hamas, and we will read it together in the book club in a little bit. The end of the second Intifada. 3 things are happening that basically become the reality of the conflict for the next 20 years until today, including. So we're talking about literally 20 years between 2003 and 2023. Number 1, Israeli government decides to close all the borders, to create a physical separation between all the territories, meaning Gaza Strip, West Bank, or I should say certain areas of the West Bank, and Israel. Why do I say certain areas? Because the entire West Bank, as part of the Oslo Accords, is divided sort of to 3 areas, A, B, and C. Area A, 100% Palestinian control. In reality, in Area A are all the major Palestinian cities that I'm sure you heard about. For example, Bethlehem, Ramallah, Jericho, Nablus, Hebron, and all the suburbs of those cities, they are all on territories A. For the last 20 years, according to the Israeli law, Palestinians from those areas cannot cross over and enter Israel. And on the other hand, Israeli citizens cannot cross over and enter those areas in territory A. So as an example, I am an Israeli citizen. I cannot get into my car and drive to Bethlehem or Ramallah or Jericho, although I lived in Jerusalem for 20 years, and each of these cities is like a 15-minute drive. I cannot do that. And that is by the Israeli law. It's considered to be like a federal offense, and Israel have decided that. And it's important sort of to emphasize that, both sides. Then we have a B area. B is an area of joint custody. Most of the B's areas are roads. Roads that are in joint custody, meaning Israeli vehicles and Palestinian vehicles can be mobile on these roads. And essentially, these roads can lead either to Palestinian areas of the West Bank, meaning Area A, or Jewish Israeli areas inside of the West Bank, which called Area C. Area C of the West Bank is 100% Israeli civil control, and Palestinians cannot go in there as well. So it's a little bit complicated, but essentially what the law says, Palestinians from the West Bank, which reside mainly in Area A and a little bit in B, cannot cross over to Israeli territory proper, meaning outside of the West Bank region. And vice versa for Israelis, same story for Gaza. This is the first thing. Second thing that happens following the Intifada, checkpoints. There are over 300 checkpoints inside the West Bank, separating the areas A, B, C, and between the West Bank and Israel proper. Why? To make sure that the first law is being implemented. How many of you have been to Israel? Okay, beautiful. Debbie, it's coming, soon. It's coming. And you haven't been?
Yeah.
So you have, yeah. So if you remember, for example, when you go drive, let's say from Jerusalem, and you've been, everybody that said yes, you've been in the last 20 years?
No.
No.
Yeah.
When have you been?
60s.
It's time to go again. We'll talk about it, June 24.
Right after the 6-Day War in 1968.
June 24, we're gonna talk about it later. When have you been?
1983.
Yeah.
It's time to come back.
We were
And
there about 10 years ago.
10 years ago, and
We go
and
every
you go
year
all the
in
time,
our
right.
last spring.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not gonna use an example, but there are, because if you've been in the last 20 years, it's very easy to visualize, but if you haven't, it's a little bit more difficult. So I'm not gonna use an example, but I will say that over 300 checkpoints to implement the first cause. And number 3 is a physical boundary, separation or division. All the words follow the same logic. There was a physical barrier that was built all around the West Bank. We're talking about something like 800 miles of a physical barrier. 95% of that barrier looks like a barbed wire fence. About 5% of that barrier looks like a very, very tall cement wall. And therefore, in the news, you probably hear terms like separation wall or separation fence. It's like a mistake and it's right at the same time because 95% of it is a fence, 5% of it is a wall. The decision about the wall versus a fence was around areas that unfortunately had the highest number of terrorists that came and harmed Israelis. But most of it is a fence, and there were a lot of issues, many different issues around that topic, but it's a phenomena that exists. It was not completed. It was supposed to be much, much, much longer. It was built for 2 years. In 2005, it was stopped. A lot of American, by the way, pressure to stop it, and it was never really sort of completed until the end. And then we had a similar barrier going around Gaza and Israel, and as you've seen on October 7th, it was not a cement wall. It was a barbed wire that was easily cut through, and we saw the result, but we'll talk about it later. So these are the results, and this has been the reality for the last 20 years. And then briefly, just to go over specifically, kind of to zoom in on Gaza. What happened?
can get rid of the chat so that I can see the rest.
But you will follow the chat and you'll tell me.
Yeah, that's what I've been
The
doing.
important
Half of these are
things.
my chats. There we go. The bottom.
Okay.
It's important.
Friends at home, we're gonna open up for questions just a little bit, but in the meantime, if you have comments or questions, please write it on the chat and Lisa will follow. So basically throughout the years, everything I've described between West Bank and Gaza was kind of the same. Including, if you remember, we talked about, of course, the Jewish settlements that started to be built on both areas after the 6-Day War. And then the major difference is that in 2005, Israel decided to disengage from Gaza. And that decision was done unilaterally, without any negotiation, without signing any agreements. Ariel Sharon came to power, and he did something that never, ever, ever anybody would believe that he would do. And he did it on his own, without even asking his own people. And he decided in the summer of 2005 to disengage from Gaza. What does it mean? We used to have 14,000 Jewish Israelis living in Gaza between 1967 to 2005. It's a long period of time. People who lived and built houses, communities, a lot of farmers, a lot of farmland, a lot of greenhouses, a lot of crops. Of course, during that time, people died. So cemeteries and synagogues, and they built a life, and they thought they're going to be there forever. They were taken out. Some of them were taken out by force. It almost caused a civil war within the Israeli society between people that were supporting this move and most of the people that were completely against this move. And the people there knew long in advance that it's about to happen, but they did not want to believe that it's going to happen. They definitely did not pack their bags, and they were not planning to go anywhere. So just imagine that when we came to the day in August 2005, and eventually the people that needed to actually follow up on this decision were soldiers who were 18, 19, 20-year-olds that needed to knock on people's doors and tell them that you're requested to leave. And if the people said we're not going anywhere, they literally needed to pull people out of their homes. And if they said that they're not going to do that, the soldiers, if they disobeyed the orders, they were taken to prison. It was a catastrophe of a summer. And the results actually of that summer, for many people that were either directly from there or connected to them, are still very, very vivid and very, very painful and very, very, very traumatic. But we did it nevertheless. And of course, follow up with that, we also took out all the military presence, Israeli military presence from Gaza, outside of it. And we kind of said, here, this is your land now, do whatever you want, and let's see if it can work out. Unfortunately, Sharon had a stroke very shortly after, and that followed with 8 years of coma, and eventually, unfortunately, he passed away. So we're never really going to know the details about the rationale that he had by doing that. Some people that were close to him said over the years that he did that sort of to see Gaza as a case study because it's smaller substantially than the West Bank, and to see what will happen if Israel will completely go out, if there is a chance that they will get it together in terms of infrastructure, leadership, and the relationship with Israel. Unfortunately, the results were nothing but negative. So if you look at this little chart I made here, on an average, every 2 years, we had a new operation. First of all, in 2006, immediately after we pulled out, they had so-called elections, and they elected Hamas. I do this because on one hand, we want to rationalize it and humanize the process, right? And say they had democratic elections and they voted. On the other hand, we understand that we're talking about a terroristic organization. So how can we talk about democracy and terroristic organization in the same sentence? But nevertheless, that has been the reality from 2006 until now, including the Gaza Strip is under control of one of the most dangerous terroristic organizations. And if before we disengaged, they already were having rockets that they would shoot on the Israeli population that was inside of Gaza, then what happened when we pulled out the Israeli population from Gaza, they started getting more advanced in technology, plus collaborating with places like Iran, digging up a whole underground city through the tunnels, getting more and more ammunition and supplies, without us even knowing, with all our intelligence of what level of ammunition they were getting to. And they started shooting more and more advanced rockets on inside Israel. And every single year, the range of the rockets grew. So if at first it was only sort of in the perimeter of the Gaza Strip, and nowadays they have rockets that can reach as north as Haifa and as south as Eilat. And we've seen it even in this war. So every year and a half or two on average, we've been talking about a vicious cycle of violence that always starts by Hamas launching rockets on Israeli population. We're talking about people that for 25 years, from 2000 until now, almost 25 years, have raised children under the conditions that every moment, just think about it, every moment of the day, they can be a siren, and they have between 30 seconds to 90 seconds to find themselves in the bomb shelter, with children, with everybody. And then, of course, the Israeli army fights back, and it happens on an average every 2 years or so. In the middle, in 2006, we had the Second Lebanon War, which was very, 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 very painful. In the middle, in 2010, we had the flotilla, if you remember, the boats that were coming from Marmara, from Turkey to Gaza, and Turkey is a truthful partner, said that they're bringing humanitarian supply into Gaza, following up yet another military operation with Israel. And when the Israeli army insisted on checking those boats because we were suspicious of what's on them, truthfully so, the 99% of what was on that boat was ammunition, and that caused a huge fiasco all over the Middle East and the world. In 2006, during the Lebanon War, we also had the kidnapping of Gilad Shalit. You just imagine, pause for a minute here, what kind of reality we're talking about. In 2006, there were 2 kidnapping events at the same day that led eventually to the Second Lebanese War. At the south, Gilad Shalit, who was a very young tank commander, his tank went on an explosive and went in fire. One soldier was killed, several were injured, and Gilad, who was injured, was dragged by the Hamas inside of Gaza. At the same day, there were 2 soldiers, similar incident on the Israeli-Lebanese border. One soldier doing his mandatory service and another one in reserve were opening up a patrol road. In the morning, same story. There was a bomb on the patrol road. The Jeep exploded. They were both injured. Hezbollah cut the fence on the border and dragged the 2 soldiers inside. To make a long story short, because I want to go back to the topic, and this is a little segue, 2 years after that, in 2008, we signed a deal with Hezbollah, and Israel released over 850 prisoners, terrorists with blood on their hands that were sitting in Israeli prison. By the way, the only reason they were sitting in prison because Israel doesn't have a death penalty. And they killed a lot of people, every single one of them. And they were released in return for bringing back the 2 soldiers from Lebanon without us even knowing if they are alive or dead. Until the moment that it actually happened. Like the parents were standing at the spot where the United Nations brought in a vehicle with their sons, and they had no idea if they're going to come out of the truck alive or not. And that was already after we released the prisoners. And unfortunately, it was a very sad ending. And when the truck stopped and they opened up the back, they took out 2 coffins. 3.5 years later, in 2011, in October 2011, we signed another deal, and this time was a Hamas, for which we released 1,200 Palestinian terrorists from Israeli prisons in order to bring back Gilad Shalit. And also then, we did not know if he is alive or not. I remember that on the morning of that deal, Karnit Goldwasser, who was the wife of one of the soldiers from 28, was on the morning talk show. And they asked her, how do you feel about what's about to happen in 2 hours? We signed a similar deal in order to bring back your husband, and your husband came back dead. Are you justifying that we're doing it again, and even with a higher number? And I will never forget, she said, it's too late for my husband. I truly hope it's not too late for Gilad. And luckily in that story, it was a happy end. And 2 hours later, Gilad entered Israel after 5.5 years. 5.5 years in captivity underground. He did not see the light of day for 5.5 years. Can you imagine? And we're talking about, it happened 12 years ago for one person. We are 68 days into this current war, and we still have close to 140 Israelis who are captive, including babies, women, elderly, men, just kind of to put into a historical context and perspective. 2011, another cycle of violence. 2014 was a big one. 2018 was an interesting event that I'm sure you all remember, when President Trump, first in January, declared to the world that he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people, which was a very destructive move for 2 reasons. One, truly for Israel, it's nice to have recognition of the ultimate power of world democracy. Somebody like the American president were saying the capital of Israel is Jerusalem. It's nice, but in reality, Israel has declared Jerusalem as its capital as early as 1948. It's not like somebody in Israel ever thought that the capital is Tel Aviv. Everybody knows that the capital is Israel. So it's nice to have a recognition, but the question is at what price? Because when he said the capital of Israel he didn't say Jerusalem, he said the capital of Israel is Jerusalem, but it's the capital of the Jewish people, when 40% of the people who live in Jerusalem are not the Jewish people. And he did not say a word about them. It's almost like a crime. And not only that, it's followed up by a plan that he published later that year. It's called the Plan of the Century, with his recommendations and suggestions and visions to regulating this conflict. He did talk about two-state solution, by the way, but he talked about Jerusalem only being the capital of Israel, absolutely declining any political, historical, religious connection or rights of the Palestinian people over Jerusalem, suggesting that the capital of the Palestinian state should be a place called Abu Dhabi. It's as if I'm a Jewish person and I'm gonna work now to establish a Jewish country, and somebody will tell me, you're gonna have a country and your capital city is going to be Kiryat Shmone, which is like the most remote, unconnected place, far, 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 far away. And then several months later, on Israel's 70th birthday, the big present was that he moved the embassy, which was, of course, on the table of the American Congress for decades, but never happened. And he was the one that made it happen. And the embassy, so-called, moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I'm not going to go now to the specifics of that, of what it actually means. Clearly, internationally, it was a big thing. When the reality is on the ground, bless you, it was a very little thing, because the building in Tel Aviv continues to do everything that it was doing. When I needed a work visa to come and serve as a rabbi here, I went to Tel Aviv, although I live in Jerusalem. But anyway, And then immediately after, in 2019, he also recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Golan Heights is that area up north that Israel conquered from Syria during the same war, Six-Day War, that until today is not recognized by anybody in the world as part of Israel. It has the same status by the international law as the West Bank and Gaza. So Trump decided to give another gift to Benjamin Netanyahu and to recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israel. And he even decided to build a town. And I remember as a tour guide that I used to drive through there all the time. And there was a big sign saying Trump Hills. Nothing happened to it. So ever since he's not in power, the sign also went down.
Oh, good.
But who knows, it could have gone a different direction. 2021, a very important historical moment during COVID, by the way. We signed normalization agreements. I love this term, but that's what's used. It's not called a peace agreement or treaty. It's called the normalization agreements, known also as the Abrahamic Accords. That sounds more poetic. Abrahamic or Abraham Accords. Israel signs these agreements with Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And that was like, wow, what is happening? Like, and as an Israeli, exactly a year ago, I was fortunate to go on this beautiful journey to India. And I flew Emirates. And I hold only an Israeli passport. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that there will be a day that an Israeli will be able to fly to Dubai on Fly Emirates. It was like, what? And I landed there and I had a 2-hour layover and the entire Arab world was at that airport. And it was like being in a virtual reality movie. I can't really, like, I grew up on knowing that I cannot go to any of these countries. And suddenly in the middle of COVID, Dubai becomes the #1 tourist destination for Israelis. Seriously, because the entire world was closed for Israel. And the only place that suddenly became open was Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And it became a hit until today, by the way. Well, right now nobody's flying, but
When I was getting out of Israel, it was one of the only places that was flying
Oh,
other than LO.
there you go. That have changed unfortunately
Yeah,
since
but-
then. But yeah, it's really, it was wild. Just another wild piece, just because I was on that flight and it was in the middle of the World Cup and my son is a soccer player and it's a big topic in our house. And Fly Emirates have online internet free for everybody. And they showed half, how you call it, semi-final of the World Cup and Morocco was playing. And I was like, what is happening? I was my Israeli passport is flying to Dubai on Fly Emirates, and I'm watching Morocco playing the semi-final of the World Cup live. And then when we landed, it was exactly the intermission. And then as we were waiting, the second half started, and all the people from all over the world were gathering together next to televisions to watch the game. It was really epic. It's good. It's to have a possibility to dream about a brighter future. It was really an epic moment. It is very connected to what's going on today. We'll get there. 2021, another very violent cycle of violence, and that of course leads us to today. So this was part number 1. It's a lot of talking, so I want to stop here for a minute and to see if we have thoughts, questions, remarks. No? Anybody at home?
No one yet.
No, no one yet. Okay, so let's see. Okay. No? You're good? Not overwhelmed? Yeah.
So when you listen to the, the news or radio, whatever, NPR, that's what I listen to, NPR, it's fairly liberal. And they talk about the Palestinians that are in Israeli military prisons. It's not it's not the same justice system for the Palestinians as it is for the Israelis, you know, people throwing rocks and whatever. And they talk about people who, you know, are there, that, you know, they haven't been convicted of anything. They're in limbo until somebody decides that they're gonna let them out, you know. They make it sound like it is not just what is
Mhm.
happening to
Beautiful.
the prisoners.
Yeah.
So do you have some
Yes,
comments about
good.
that?
So this is a prompt question. So let's do a little bit of a summary, because I call this course the void between the Zionist dream and the Palestinian dream. So let's look at how each side views this conflict. And hopefully you'll get your answer there. And I know that Myron Dembo was asking me these questions from the very beginning. I don't think he's with us here, but he told me that he's gonna watch the recording. And it's a very, very important question. Yeah.
We have one other question
Yes.
in the chat. Not sure if it's not silly. Are there any Israeli Christian citizens? If so, are they not allowed to go to Bethlehem either?
That's a good question. Are there Israeli Christian citizens? The answer is yes, not a lot, but yes. Generally speaking, out of the total Israeli demographics, about 2% are Christians. Most of them are not citizens, by the way. They are residents. Those who are citizens, they are Palestinians who became citizens in 1948. If they are Christians, they can go to Bethlehem. Yes, they can go to Bethlehem and all the other places as well. Yeah. So it's actually a very good,
Mhm.
correction,
Nice.
because the
Yeah.
law I was referring to is for Jewish citizens, Jewish Israeli citizens. It means that the Palestinians who are Israeli citizens can go anywhere, because a lot of them have family members in the West Bank and some also in Gaza, and that's also important. Anything else at home?
That's it.
No, go ahead.
Are all those settlements, are they in part C? Is that the idea?
95% of them, yes. Yeah, and a little bit in B, but mostly in C. Yeah. So we'll start with the Palestinian point of view. Okay. The Palestinian point of view, first of all, and we're talking about sort of in general to understand how they see from the beginning to end when they address this conflict. Or let's say, if there will be a Palestinian speaker instead of me right now, how he or she will explain what this conflict is about and how it's evolved over the last 150 years. So the first point they're going to talk about is about loss of land. You see, in the Palestinian worldview,
Years under that black.
Yeah,
yeah, maybe, but I'll tell you
Cursor
the
off
years.
to the-
Open the chat and close
no, you
it.
just have to go.
But I'll tell you the years. I'll tell you the years.
Move the cursor over to the-
I actually don't remember if they're years. I
They're
don't
okay.
think they are.
Get rid of the
I
chat.
can see them on my screen. It's
Oh,
just their
okay.
computers being weird.
Computers,
I know, it's so perfect, Rabbi Lana,
there you
you're
go.
right. Thank you. Lee.
Yeah. Nothing technological is perfect. You already know that. Okay, we're going from left to right, unusual. Well, usual for you, unusual for us. So in the Palestinian worldview, all of it is Palestine. It is all Palestine. And until the end of the 19th century, it was all 100% fully green. The way the Palestinians will view this map in 1947, which is the time of the partition plan and the United Nations vote, is that everything that is not green minus the water, meaning this is the Dead Sea, this is the Sea of Galilee. So all the white kind of spots, this is the Jewish presence on the land. But everything that is green is Palestinian presence of the land. Then when they look in the partition, they clearly feel that the partition is completely unfair. Because in their mind, the Jewish people only live in these white dots. So how come the United Nations are offering the Jewish population all of this and all of this and all of this, which is the Negev Desert, the shore, and the Galilee? So a Palestinian will say, of course we said no to this plan, because in our mind it's completely unfair and unjust. And we are unwilling to compromise and settle for anything. We want it all, because to us, all of it is Palestine. Notice my language, from the river to the sea, this is Palestine, and this is ours. Going forward, if you remember, following the War of Independence, or in Palestinian language, the Nakba, Gaza Strip was Egyptian, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem was Jordanian. But it's still Palestine in Palestinian eyes. And after 67, until this very day, all of it became Israel. This get Gaza, but even the West Bank, you see the difference between here and here? See, because a Palestinian will say, when we wanted the Jordanian rule, all of it was ours. And for the last 56 years that we are under Israeli military rule, we don't even have all of the West Bank. Because everything that is white in the West Bank are settlements that are built by Jewish Israelis. So if I'm a Palestinian, I feel that the Zionists, the Jews, the Israelis, it's all the same name to me, they are taking carpet under my feet all the time. And at this point, I barely have anything, when I'm really supposed to have everything. And this is the number one claim of every Palestinian that you'll ever meet, that believes that between the river and the sea, it is all Palestine. This is the first claim, and it's a very, very important claim, and this is a good visual kind of to understand. Going forward, there are gonna be some rough pictures, heads up. But, you know, I was thinking, how are we gonna narrate this? So my father taught me that one picture is better than 1,000 words.
I'm gonna say a picture.
For the last 56 years, we need to be honest to the conversation, right? For the last 56 years, the Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, live under Israeli military occupation. Israeli military occupation. What does it mean? That the law that falls in the West Bank and in Gaza is a military law. It means that the decision makers are army generals. It means if the Palestinians are being arrested by the army, they will be imprisoned primarily, or at the beginning, by the military court. And they will be held in military arrest. By the way, Jewish Israelis that are in their army service, if they have done something wrong, they will also be sentenced by the same military court. And they will also, if they need to be in prison, will be in military prison and not in any other prison. This is the starting point. Now we're going to talk about rights. So if I'm a Palestinian, for the last 56 years, the minute I leave my home, the first thing I see is Israeli army. And for the last 20 years, if I live in Ramallah or Bethlehem or Jericho, one of those 8 territories, and I want to go to Israel, I can't. Before 2000, let's say I'm a peaceful Palestinian. I have never done anything connected to terrorism. I'm a peaceful human being, just want to live my life. Before 2000, the Intifada that I personally did not initiate, maybe my neighbors did, but I didn't. I used to go to Israel all the time. I used to go to the beach. I used to work in Israel, and that was my income. I used to be free. Maybe not as free as I want, but I was mobile. But for the last 20 years after the Second Intifada, I haven't seen the beach for 20 years. I lost my income. And every single time if I need to have a good reason, and I need to get a permit from whom? From whom? From the army. And very often it's humiliating. And even let's say that I went through atrocities and I received a permit to go to Israel for whatever it is. Maybe it's medical, maybe it's something else. For one day, usually I'll need to go back at the same day. I will need to go through a checkpoint. You know how humiliating it is to go for a Palestinian Muslim woman with a hijab through a checkpoint? I am a 50-year-old woman. I wear my gown, I wear my hijab. Sometimes an 8-year-old soldier will tell me to step aside and they will want to search me. This is the Palestinian view. And this is their experience. And there's nothing we can do in order to beautify it. It's the truth. It's the reality. It's a reality of occupation. And this is how the Palestinians are viewing that. And sometimes it's more ugly than other times, but this is a very, very common picture. And if I am this Palestinian woman, I'm raging. I'm suffering. I want to be a free person in my own land that is taken from me constantly. And this is what I get. Nowadays, showing up a Palestinian flag in Israel, and not even the last 2 months, even way before that. At some points over the years, it was illegal to show up like this, a Palestinian flag on public spaces. And although now there is no legal justification for it, but it's a big no-no, nevertheless. And if I'm a Palestinian living in East Jerusalem, for example, and East Jerusalem was annexed to Jerusalem after 1967. So it's a little bit different than the West Bank. If I'm a Palestinian living in East Jerusalem, I'm not occupied by the Israeli military. I live in East Jerusalem, which is annexed under the international law. If a country annexes a territory, then the people who live in that territory have to have equal rights to everybody else. But the Palestinians of East Jerusalem don't have equal rights. They are not citizens, but residents. They although can walk and drive freely to where they want, but they cannot come to Damascus Gate, which is the main entrance on their side of town, to go into the Temple Mount, for example, and hold a Palestinian flag. There will be a riot. They can be beaten. They can be arrested. They can be spat on. They can be all kinds of different things. It's not a pretty situation. And I am that Palestinian living in East Jerusalem, in an area that is annexed to Israel. Why do I need to constantly feel that I'm a second-class citizen? By the way, I have a big family. And when my kids are getting married, in my tradition, I need to provide for them. I need to build them where to live. Guess what? The Jerusalem municipality doesn't give me building permits. There are over 30 Jewish new neighborhoods that were built in East Jerusalem for the last 56 years, and 0 Palestinian neighborhoods. And my people make 40% of the entire demographics of Jerusalem. We don't have enough classrooms. We don't have enough health clinics. We don't have enough garbage collectors. We don't have enough youth movements or clubs. And so on and so on and so on. But I want to provide for my family, so I put aside my entire life, and eventually I don't get a permit, so I build without a permit. And when I build without a permit, in X amount of years, somebody will come at 5 o'clock in the morning, knock on my door, and demolish my house. And they will have a legal court authorization to do that. Why? Because I built without a permit. Why did I build without a permit? Because I didn't give you a permit. I can go on and on and on and on, but do you get an impression of the situation? It is not a pretty sight. I am that Palestinian, and that's how I'm feeling. I wake up in the morning, one day, I used to have a nice view, and now I need to look at the concrete wall. And I cannot see anything on the other side, and I cannot go on the other side because Israel have decided to build a security barrier. I did not ask for that. I was not consulted with. It just showed up. And again, it's not a pretty sight. And of course, again, my entire interaction as a Palestinian woman on an everyday basis, when I want to go pray at my holy place, Haram al-Sharif, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Golden Dome of the Rock, these are one of the most important Muslim places in the whole world. When I want to go there, I need to find Israeli police on the way and to take a risk. One day they will let me in, one day they will not. What it depends on, sometimes whatever's happening there, sometimes on the mood of the policeman or the soldier. And it's constant, it's constant, it's constant. And maybe I'm elderly and I need to deal with 18-year-old youngsters in uniform, in weapon. And again, it's not a pretty sight. Something that we hear often in the world. I, as a Palestinian, 100%, of course I think Israel is an apartheid. If there's one set of laws for one population and another set of laws for the other population, how can I call it anything else? I am, in my entire existence, and all of my people as a Palestinian, am occupied. If I live in the West Bank, then the Israelis literally telling me, you can go here, but not here. You can drive here, but not here. So I don't have any other name for it rather than an apartheid. This is how I view the world. Israel is only taking from me, taking, and not giving anything. And then they elect this government. The most radical right-wing government that Israel has ever had. And then they bring this clown in the middle with the blue suit, who is nobody, no education, no nothing. And he lives in the settlement. He lives in Kiryat Arba, one of the largest settlements of the West Bank. And he goes for election and covers the entire city of Hebron, one of the most important Palestinian cities, with slogans saying, we're going to show them who is the boss. I need to tolerate that as a Palestinian? Why? I live in an apartheid. And this person makes the rules. When he wants to go up to the Temple Mount, he has an entourage of guards who are providing for his security. When I want to go to the Temple Mount, I first need to get a permit and to go through a whole saga of getting it. And then if I was fortunate enough to get it, then I need to go through all gazillion of challenges along the way. My life is far from a dream. And it's all because of Israel. And it's all because of the Jewish people. And it's all because of Zionism. And of course, let the world know what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. I did not start a war. I live in Ramallah. What do I have to do with that? But I have family members. This is my family. Is that just that my family will live like this? Is that just that people will just be bombarded like that? The Gaza Strip is one of the most populated areas in the world, even before October 7th. 2 million people on a tiny land, nowhere to go, nowhere to grow. Egypt on one side, Israel on the other side, the Mediterranean Sea on the third side. And now it looks like this. Where will I go? Where will my family go? Yet again, it's not a pretty sight, and only one finger to blame: Israel. And of course, let's recruit the whole world to support us and to say the slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Because as you remember, I showed you on the first map, 150 years ago, there were barely any Jewish people on my land. It was my land. They took my land, they took my dignity, they took everything from me. And I need to get it back as a Palestinian, from the river to the sea. It all must be mine. All I see is the crying of children with one eye, and all I see with the other eye is the military occupation. And I don't want to live like this anymore. I want it all. I want it back. I want them out. I want to control my land. All right, we get the picture? I invite us to take a deep breath. Because clearly the Israeli viewpoint is a very different viewpoint. A very different viewpoint. From the Israeli perspective, our people have been refugees for over 2,000 years. We were originated once upon a time, thousands of years ago, on our historic homeland. The land that was promised to us by God Almighty through Abraham and all the generations that followed. And we are their ancestors. For thousands of years, we were refugees dispersed around the world. And then a big miracle happened to us. A miracle. The world have decided that we deserve to go back to our historic homeland and to have independence and to have a national home and a flag and an army and a police and an identity, and that we must be recognized among the nations of the world. And that miracle happened on May 14th, 1948, 75 years ago. And we want to do everything in our power to protect this miracle. Because we don't have any other homeland. And here's the thing. Before 1948, Jewish people lived all over the world. In some places, it was a good life. They never thought that something like the Holocaust could happen. Until it did. And therefore, we're unwilling to take that chance again. Because we don't have anywhere else to go. We have one homeland. And that's Israel. And we're gonna do everything for it. As Jewish people, our narrative looks at the same map. And for everything that the Palestinian narrative will say, this is ours, or this was taken from us, it's the same map. Our narrative says, that's not true. We came back home. We did not intrude anybody's land. This land was waiting for us for 2,000 years. We finally came home. And although we did not expect to find anybody there, but when we did, we were nice enough and we were willing to share. Well, they didn't. And because we were willing to share, this is inaccurate. It's just simply not true. This is a result of the Palestinian constant no to share. We have nothing to do with that. It's a result of life. When you say no in life, you lose things. And you need to take responsibility for it. You cannot blame somewhere else for your own choices and for your own decisions. And therefore, Deal with the reality that you yourself created, says the Jewish Israeli narrative. And again, a miracle happened to us, and we're going to do everything in our power to keep and guard this miracle alive. And as we try to do that, and we try to figure it out, we get the first intifada. And we try to calm it down, and we go to the Oslo Accords. And we shake hands with the enemy. And we come up with the plan of land for peace, and we're willing to give a lot of the land that we conquered in 67. We just want peace. We raise generations of children on peace songs, and we educating them that the only possible answer is peace. And we got back from Oslo after we sang all the beautiful peace songs, and we get this, 1990s. My dear father, that was 5 seconds away from bus number 5 that left the Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv. And so many others that didn't. And this becomes the reality of the Israeli society during the 90s. Why? Because we wanted peace. You see, in our narratives, we raised our children, we shook hands with the enemies, we were ready to give up everything, and this is what we get in return. When our sole goal is to protect our people in our own homeland. And then we get to, these are not fireworks, to rockets in the sky. I grew up in Israel since I was 8 years old. Sitting in bomb shelters and rockets above my head is a story that I carry with me since I was 8 years old. And this is the story that all the Israeli children grew up with. And that is after we educated ourselves that we want to have peace. This is what we get in return. And of course, then we get to October 7th. These are Palestinian terrorists of the Hamas standing on an Israeli tank on October 7th with a Palestinian flag in the hand. In our narrative, this is what we received after we took our people and forces from Gaza. We gave them Gaza, and this is what we received in return. We gave them Gaza, and this is what we received in return. We gave them Gaza, and they took our people to Gaza. This is Sherry Bibas and Kfir Bibas and Ariel Bibas, and 9-month-old baby was on October 7th, and a 4-year-old Ariel who still did not come back, and we have no idea what happened to them. This is our narrative. 68 days into the war, 400 Israeli captive. This is what we believed in. So as you can see, it's almost like the two flags that coming from one place, but going into completely different directions. They're not meeting. They're most likely not going to meet. They're never going to be on the same page of the book. They're never going to be in the same book. They are completely two different books, two completely different stories, two completely different narratives that are going in parallel lines, and unfortunately brought us to the reality that we're in currently. I want to go briefly through some of the solutions that were proposed along the way, but before I want to see if we have any questions, thoughts, or comments.
I just would like to say, Rabbi Lana, that you're playing the role of a Palestinian person and speaking in the first person and showing us the pictures was really powerful. I appreciate your doing that.
One question, I'm always still confused about the relationship between Gaza and Israel. I know that Israel left Gaza, and I know that Gazans destroyed the greenhouses and turned it into anarchy and chaos. Gazans
claim that that Gaza is an open air prison. But there's no Israelis there, but it does seem that both Israel and Egypt keep Gaza a closed society. So is the truth somewhere in between, or?
The reason that the Palestinians feel, or that the world opinion supports their feel or claim that it's an open air prison, is because on one side there's Israel. Israel will not let Gazans in Israel since 2005, before 2005, yes, but not after. On the other side, there's Egypt. Egypt completely closed their borders and don't allow the Palestinians into Egypt. And on the third side is Mediterranean Sea. If, when Israel left in 2005, they would build some sort of an autonomy, which will be managed by some sort of leadership that was peaceful, beautiful things could have happened to Gaza.
Correct.
They're on the shore of a sea. There's a port. They can have an outing to the world. There could have been an airport that will be built there. There could have been flourishing of industry and infrastructure, and potentially a way to step in both into Israel and into Egypt. Unfortunately, none of that happened. As you've seen, we went out, Hamas reinforced himself, and every single minute from the minute that we left, we have received terrorism, whether it's underground, above the sky, or what we've seen on October 7th. And because this have been constant and constant and constant, Israel felt that there's no other choice than to make sure that we are keeping them inside. Egypt did the same thing. And the result is that it's a growing population without any possibility to expand or to move around or to leave. By the way, also, there was not even an option to leave. And that, of course, created this climax of it as if that we are in a prison.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And all of that, unfortunately, now I'm gonna be me, Lana, is a result of a terroristic organization. What the world needs to understand that Israel right now doesn't fight Gaza. Israel fights a terroristic organization. Unfortunately, and I say it was a big heartache, it's a war. And in a war, innocent people get killed. And I wish it wasn't like that. But unfortunately, the terroristic organization that we are fighting is using the Palestinian people as a human shield.
For sure.
Because they are in all the weak spots of the Palestinian society, in schools, in hospitals, in mosques, in kindergartens. This is where they're at.
Do you have any idea how much percentage of the Gazan civilians are basically complicit? Seems to me it's their fathers, their boyfriends, their husbands, and so on.
At this point, I don't think there is one person that can answer that question, unfortunately. And it doesn't matter. I don't think
It's
there's
unknown.
a Palestinian person that can answer that question.
Okay.
Rabbi Lana, we have one more question.
Yes,
Why won't Egypt let Palestinians in?
that's a great question. Why Egypt doesn't let Palestinians in? I cannot speak for Egypt. I can only speak for the facts. Egypt never wanted the Palestinian people, never. When Israel signed peace treaty with Egypt in 1978, there was a negotiation, tit for tat, and we offered Gaza Strip with the Palestinian people. And they said, no, thank you.
I wonder
We
why.
only want the Sinai Peninsula. We don't want Gaza, and we definitely don't want the Palestinian people. By the way, years later, in 1994, we had similar experience with Jordan. They never wanted them. None of the Arab countries ever wanted them. But nevertheless, the blaming finger was always towards Israel. And that is also part of the tragedy for them and for us. It's for all of the people that are involved. Let me cover some of the solutions just so we'll have it in mind. The most typical solution that was suggested over the years, of course, coming out of the Oslo Accords, is something that is called a two-state solution. In most simplified manner, two-state solution, the idea is to go back to that original plan of the United Nations of 1947, the same one that we said yes and they said no, and to more or less have the same structure. I say more or less because many years have passed, even in the 90s, when this was negotiated on, it has been many, many years after. Israel grew by numbers, so clearly it needed more land. So we were not going exactly to the same suggested borders, but more or less in the area. And in the 90s, there were already settlements in the West Bank, but there was also negotiations for territorial swap. And both parties agreed upon. Yasser Arafat, I remind you, in Camp David, but also in Oslo, agreed to most of the components of this agreement. So the idea was basically to lay the foundations that will later lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state. Let's put the lens of the narratives again. Most of the Palestinians, I personally, as a peace person, know in the West Bank, it's very difficult to talk about nowadays Gaza. So I'll talk about what is, I feel at least more sort of tangible. Will say that they are for this solution, or at least have said over the years. They understood that they're not going to get everything. And the fact that they were fighting to have everything did not lead them to a good place. So if we want to get advanced in life, then let's already say yes to something. So for the most moderate Palestinian public, the two-state solution was a good idea. They would be ready to work towards it. To most of the Jewish people that I know inside of Israel, and again, this is in the 90s or beginning of 2000, this also seemed like a good idea. A lot of people in Israel were supportive of the concept of land for peace. Not everybody, clearly. Yitzhak Rabin, I remind you, who was the leader of this initiative, essentially was murdered by an Israeli. So clearly there was an opposition, and there were radicalists that also fought for the concept of the greater land of Israel, full land of Israel. But the majority on both sides were for that idea. But it didn't happen because of the objective minority on both sides. Another idea that was suggested over the years is called a one-state solution. What does it mean, a one-state solution? A one-state solution means that we open up all the borders between the Jordan River all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. It will be a country of all its citizens. It can be called Israel, it can be called Palestine, it can be called chocolate ice cream. It doesn't matter what it's going to be called. But the concept is like in America, whoever lives from here to here, citizenship of this one entity. I know a lot of Palestinians that would say that this is a very good idea. They are so tired from what is going on that they will say, I already don't care what is going to be called. I just want to live freely and have equal rights to all. So if that's what it's going to be, great. I want to live in this place. I know a lot of Palestinians that would say that. I don't know a lot of Jewish people that would say that. Maybe the Jewish people that was blocking 101 earlier this morning will say that. But the vast majority of the Jewish world will not say that. And the reason is very, very simple. By the way, today, not tomorrow morning, today, if we're going to do that, now, today, and we're going to open up all the borders. 3 million Palestinians at the West Bank, 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, and 2 million Palestinians inside of Israel, Israeli citizens, and almost 500,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem. That's 7.5. How many Jews live in Israel today? 7. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
If we do that today, we are already outnumbered. And I remind you that in our narrative, a miracle happened to us. We have one homeland, and we created it as the only asylum for the Jewish people from all over the world. That means that life will ever be different for you here in America. You have a place to go. This was the dream. it is still the dream. And therefore, most of the Jewish people will never, ever, ever agree to the one-state solution. Because one-state solution means no more a Jewish homeland. In the meantime, as we're discussing 2 or 1, we have the reality. And the reality is a 3-state, it's already not an option, it's a reality, it's a situation. Why? We have the state of Israel, which is a fact of life. We have the West Bank, which is far from perfect on both sides. And it's ran by the PA or the PLO. Mahmoud Abbas is the leader, who is getting close to being 90 years old. The last elections over there were also in 2006. There are no successors on the horizon. And they have no connection to Gaza, not territorially, but more importantly, no communication. The PLO and Hamas are not talking. And of course, the third reality, which is a tragic, tragic, tragic catastrophe, is Gaza. And that has been the reality for quite some time, by the way. But of course, now we really, really, really see it. We understand it. It's in front of us. So what's next? One way, and in the middle of the war, I think anybody, or most people, I don't want to say anybody, most people cannot even put their minds to think about a different way, is that each will go their separate way. How to do that, of course, is unclear because we're still fighting for the same land. So the other possibility, if we're not going to different directions, we should find somehow an opportunity and a possibility to go into the same direction. Another book that we're going to read, I'm not going to do it now, but another book that we're going to read in the book club is by Yossi Klein Halevi, who is an amazing, amazing author, an American Jew who made Aliyah to Israel in the 70s. This is his 4th book, and every single one of them is excellent. This came out about 3 or 4 years ago. He wrote 10 letters to his imaginary Palestinian friend that lives on the other side of the security barrier. He can see him from the hill of his house window, but he cannot reach. So he's thinking about him and he's writing him 10 letters in which he explains to him the Jewish Zionist Israeli narrative. When Yossi Klein Halevi came to Israel in the 70s, he grew up in, I think, in New York, in a very, very Orthodox household, very conservative in the mindset. His first book is called Memoirs of a Jewish Extremist, just to give you an idea. In this book, in his letters, he describes the change that he went through his life and how deeply he believes in the concept of the two-state solution. This is nowadays fascinating. He's also a contemporary, amazing scholar. Maybe we'll bring him here when he visits Los Angeles. But in the meantime, we're going to enjoy this fascinating book. When it came out, he did a very smart move. He translated it to Arabic. Mm-hmm. And the online digital copy of the book in Arabic is online, free. So people started reading it, and he started to receive letters from Palestinians and Muslims from all over the world. And in the second edition of the book that he published it with a codex of letters that he had a correspondence with many Palestinians from all over the world. And sort of to end up, I promise you we're going to end up on a positive note, because if we're not going to have hope, then there's not much to it. Before I do that, any final remarks, thoughts, questions?
I don't know if you heard the Ezra Klein show where he interviewed Yossi Klein.
I
who
think
lived-
somebody told me. about
Yeah,
it,
and then also interviewed a Palestinian
Mm,
person
mm.
and they were next to each other and it was really
Mm.
very interesting. And anyone wants the link, I can
Yes,
send
yes.
it on.
Yeah.
I'll send it.
Send me and I'll send to everybody. Yeah.
Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, they don't have passports? They can't get passports? Or they can, or,
Not Israeli passports.
but I mean, can they leave?
Palestinians in Gaza cannot go anywhere.
They can't leave it, they
No.
can't leave, they can't go anywhere.
That cannot go anywhere,
Right.
which adds, of course, to the feeling of prison. Palestinians in the West Bank, they have an expired Jordanian passport. They can travel with it, not through Israel, but through Jordan. They need to get through Jordan. And then from Jordan, they can go. And they need visa to almost every place in the world that they go to.
But Israeli Arabs, those
Yes.
who either did not run away or were forced
Or
out, it's
citizens.
debatable what, you know,
Citizens.
and they have children, they and their children and all the generations, they're all Israeli.
Yes,
And there is no apartheid. They vote, they have.
100%, yes.
So with the allegation of apartheid, there, it's another thing that bothers me with this term gets thrown around like it's a fact. It's not a fact. They're
It's
not
not a fact.
Israeli.
Correct.
So
And most, let me tell you, that most of the people that are using this fact, they don't know the distinction between Israeli Palestinians or Palestinians in Gaza or Palestinians in the West Bank.
Right.
And therefore, they're using the term as a general sort of way to throw out Israel as an apartheid. And
I'm-
again, there are definitely elements of apartheid within the West Bank, which is under Israeli military occupation. There are specific examples, there are specific areas, and yes, 100% Israel need to do better than that. There need to be a better solution of
it is,
ongoing.
it
but
seems very bad right now because not
Right.
even before Gaza.
right,
It's very
even
bad.
before,
It's just-
100%, I agree.
I think a lot of them are using it as an opportunity to just do whatever they want.
There are a lot of challenges there, a lot. And I'm happy to teach another course about the, the everyday issues of that. You will let me know in the survey. But yes, when we talk about the Israeli part and the Palestinians who are Israeli citizens are 22% of the Israeli demographics.
Right.
Equal citizens. Again, it's not 100%. Every country has issues of racism and everything that is attached to that. But it is very, 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 very far from saying it's apartheid, which definitely within Israel, it is not. The West Bank issue needs to be addressed 100%. Jeff? No, okay. So I wanted to share a song with you by two women. One is a Palestinian Israeli citizens, although, but a Palestinian, Mir Awad. And the other one is an Israeli who is actually very famous in the world, and I'm sure you maybe heard of her, Achinoam Nini. She goes in the world by Noah. And several years ago, I don't remember exactly how many, they sang together in the Eurovision competition. It's a song competition of European countries, and there are two countries that are not European countries that participate every single time. One is Israel, and the other one is Australia. But it's a big kind of a thing. It's one of the biggest song competitions in the world. And they sang together a song that I always find very, very moving and hopeful. They sing it in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. I didn't find, I wanted you to see them live, and I didn't find a video with subtitles. So these are the words, but they basically, most of they're repetitive. There must be another way. Your eyes, my sister, they say all that my heart asks for. We've come a long way, such a difficult way, hand in hand, and the tears flow in vain, a nameless pain. We just wait for the next day to come. There must be another way. Mira Awad is Palestinian that was born in the Galilee to a family that some of them became Palestinian refugees, and they are until today in many different places of the world. She herself was born to two sets of parents that became citizens, so she gained citizenship as well. Achinoam Nini comes from Yemen. So her family escaped Yemen after the establishment of the state of Israel. They were refugees and they came to their homeland. And there are two extraordinary women, both are big, big, big lights and big peace activists in the world. Mira now lives in London, and but she comes to Israel all the time. And Achinoam, through the last 2 months, I don't think there was one night that she was at home. She travels the entire country and she just does shows for free to people that lost their homes, to the soldiers, to the evacuees, to just a beautiful soul.
There must be another way. עינייך אחות, כל מה שליבי מבקש אומרות. עברנו עד כה דרך ארוכה, דרך כה קשה, יד ביד, והדמעות צומות צומות לשווא. ללא שם אנחנו מחכות רק ליום שיבוא אחרי. There must be another way. There must be another way. عينك بتقول رح يجي يوم وكل الخوف يزول. بعينك إصرار إنه عنا خيار نكمل هالمسار مهما طال الأوقات. في عنوان وحيد للأحزان بنادي للمدى للسما عنيدة. There must be another way. There must be another way. There must be another way. דרך ארוכה נעבור, דרך כה קשה, יחד אל האור, עינקי בתעול, כל החוף יזול. And when I cry for both of us. My pain has no name. And when I cry to the merciless sky and say, there must be another way. והדמעות זולגות זורמות לשווא, כאב ללא שם. אנחנו מחכות רק ליום שיבוא אחרי. There must be another way. There must be another way. There must be another way. תודה רבה. שוכרן גברת.
It's great.
Very powerful.
Okay. And then really lastly, I shared this poem with you on our first very session. Mahmoud Darwish is the National Palestinian, or one of the National Palestinian poets who spent many, many years in Lebanon, and he writes a lot about the Nakba and about the homeland and about everything that happened in between. And one of the most powerful poems that I know of his talks about the war and reminds us that the war will end, the leaders will shake hands, the old women will keep looking for her
Hello, testing. Can everyone hear on Zoom? Yeah, great.
Shall we plug it to the computer?
Hold on.
This?
No, it's already here. Like they're here. Hold on.
But you don't wanna, let's have them here.
Oh, they need to see it, right? Right, you're here. I'm focused on Zoom so much, so like I forgot about you. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I don't have the thing though, but if you tell me what the name of it is, I
No,
can
no,
look
it's
it up.
fine. I don't need it.
Okay.
I'll know it by heart. But we don't have the owl now.
No, but it's okay.
But you can actually, it's right here.
Yeah, I don't really need it though. I'll just sit here. It'll be fine.
What?
Well, we're not. Oh, you want to see them? Is that why?
I don't know.
We're not sharing the screen, right?
No.
So it doesn't matter. Here, I'm just gonna sit here. It's fine.
Too much, too much.
Everyone can see Rabbi Lana, right? On Zoom and hear her. See, there you go. It doesn't matter.
Okay, really, just to conclude, so the war will end and the leaders will shake hands. And we don't know who caused it, says Mahmoud Darwish, but we know who paid the price. And in a war, nobody wins. Everybody loses. And some lose more and some lose less, but everybody loses. There's no way to come winners out of a war. So this war, just like all previous ones, will end as well. And the leaders will shake hands because at the end, this is how the war ends. Whether we sign something or not, we shake hands because we need to stop. We cannot continue fighting forever. And unfortunately, the losses along the way are horrific. And right now, it seems like it's going from bad to worse on a daily basis, truly, on both sides. But there will be a day when it will be over. And we also need to remember that we make peace with our enemies. We never make peace with our friends because we already have that. Peace is done with our enemies. So even when we're fighting our worst enemies, we need to strive and hope that somehow there will be a possibility, or like Mira Awad and Achinom Nini sang to us, there must be another way. And just lastly, I know we passed our time and thank you for your patience. There's this beautiful prayer that a friend of mine in Israel, Rabbi Oded Mazor, have wrote over the last days of everything that is going on. So I just wanted to share it with you. It was on the slideshow, but I'm happy to send it to you. Luckily, I took a picture of it before. In the days when each hour collides with the next, we have no choice but to cry and to laugh with the same eyes, to mourn and to dance at the same time. And the long arc of history is compressed into one day and 1 hour. We ask for the strength to contain the intensity of our bursting hearts, to rejoice with those who will be able to embrace today, to enfold all of those leaning into their longing souls trembling, to hold on to hope without letting go, and to leave some quiet space for a silent scream. Please grant us room to shatter into pieces and the spirit to rebuild anew.
Beautiful.
It's 9:15. Thank you for being with me. It's been quite a journey. I'm happy to stay if anybody wants to ask questions or anything else. Please fill up the survey. Will you get it? Hopefully in next couple days, I will send it to you. And we'll see what we want to learn next.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Rabbi Lana.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. You'll be getting a survey.
Thank you, Lisa.
So,
Western countries, we respect women a lot. more
thanks,
now.
Danielle. I'll let her
What
know.
about in the Palestinian culture? Is,
Bye, everyone.
your
Thanks so
voice
much.
heard as well?
Good night. Thank you very much.
Very famous.
Night, everyone.
Yeah, she's very famous. Of course,